Bob Freeman, as you know, you've been a reporter for a long time. He has been a go-to source for two generations of reporters for more than 40 years. He's been the guy you call in state government to get help with the open meetings law, to get access to public records that maybe a state agency or a local government or a school board is withholding. He knows that stuff inside and out, and he was a nationally recognized public records expert who was really lionized by some members of the press. He was given lifetime achievement awards by state associations representing newspapers and news outlets. He was inducted into the Open Government Hall of Fame. But we spoke to 8 different women on the record who said that he used that against them. We've spoken to 3 women who said that while he was on the phone with them, he pulled up social media images and commented on their appearance, whether it's their ethnicity, whether it is their red lipstick, and it made women very, very uncomfortable. And one of those women was in the Democrat and Chronicle newsroom, which is something that you explored. Meaghan, maybe you can tell us more about what you found there.
Well, our reporter, Sarah Taddeo, when she was very new here, probably about 5 years ago, she, at the request and direction of all of her colleagues, called Bob because he was, as you said before, he was the guy. He was the man that you called if you had a question about open government, about transparency, about open meetings, whether your government officials were, operating correctly, whether their meeting agendas were correct, if they were sneaking off into executive session to talk about things that they shouldn't be talking about in secret. So Sarah called him up and, being very professional on her end, he started making comments about her ethnicity. He, at one point during the conversation, told her that he was on her LinkedIn page looking at her photo, and she was very young and pretty. And this was very upsetting to her at the time, and so much so that she kind of slammed down the phone at the end of the conversation, and our news director overheard that. And he and our executive editor at the time drafted a letter to Freeman telling him that, the way you behaved on the phone with Sarah was inappropriate, and we hope that this never happens again. And, because maybe so many people relied on him and there weren't a lot of, nobody heard about like creepy stuff happening with him. I before that, so like we didn't know that this was a pattern,
right?
Obviously, and I think in talking to the news director here at that time, he thought this was just kind of like a weird one-off because he'd never gotten any complaints or concerns coming in from other reporters.
Right.
But it really.
I'm sorry, Meaghan.
Just that it turns out that this was a pattern of behavior is really disturbing. And it seems to be, this incredible betrayal of not just the women that he came into interaction with, but of the very ideals that he espoused through this career. It's, of openness, of transparency, of good government. It's just all really fascinating, ignominious end to his career.
And that's something else we should mention, that in the Inspector General's letter to the Department of State, which was Bob Freeman's employer, it mentions that they also found scantily clad women and sexually explicit photos on his computer, and found him engaging in sexually suggestive emails with on his work email address with a woman that he apparently met at Syracuse University the year prior. I mean, this is the guy that helped reporters like you and I get access to people's emails,
right,
and knew very well what was public records and what was not. And that's something that caught a lot of people by surprise. The other thing I wanted to say too, we were able to find 4 examples where a reporter did speak to their editors about conduct by Mr. Freeman, but each of those were at separate newspapers, right? So there were 4 separate sets of editors who knew about a single incident, and they all, for the most part, said We thought maybe this was an isolated incident. In the case of the Democrat and Chronicle, they did send Bob a official letter saying, I trust that we won't have any similar misadventures in the future. But I didn't find evidence that there were any editors out there that knew of multiple allegations or a pattern of allegations.
Correct. I didn't either. And in talking with other reporters a little bit about this topic, it didn't sound like there was like a widespread sort of whisper network of reporters who said, stay away from this guy. I mean, everyone, if you needed to know anything about open government, everyone would tell you go to Bob. He was the guy. And it wasn't just us. I mean, there's so many other people that he came into contact with, because he didn't just deal with the media. He dealt with everyday citizens who wanted to find out whether or not their government agencies were operating correctly. And he was also quite well known for, in retrospect, for being the guy who would always answer the phone or who would always call people back. He was very accessible for a government official.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think maybe we should leave it there. It was a difficult story to report, but I just do want to commend the women that we spoke to for this. It wasn't it wasn't an easy thing to speak about, and a lot of women showed a lot of courage speaking out. I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When something like this happens, oftentimes women feel like they're alone. Nobody will believe you, or that maybe I misunderstood, and this really wasn't what was happening. But to her credit, the Journal news reporter went to her editor and said, this is what happened, and she was believed, and they made an official complaint. And as seems to be the case in too many of these cases, we find out later that this has been going on for a long time.